Fahrenheit, or to give it its better title, Indigo Prophecy, least of all because the game always gives its temperature in Celsius, is the second product from French developers Quantic Dream, best known for their third attempt Heavy Rain and their upcoming shebang, Beyond Two Souls. Fahrenheit was released on Xbox, PS2 and PC to a pretty good reception and was something I quite looked forward to and did enjoy on release. You might have noticed that I've avoided the word game so far, and the word movie despite what the main menu says, or interactive drama as David Cage calls it. Jumped Up Simon Says-a-thon doesn't quite do it either. Despite that, I'm just going to say it's ostensibly a game so I don't have trouble semantically when I get to the gameplay segment of this review. We have 3 main playable characters. The foremost is everyman Lucas Kane, who kickstarts his story by stabbing a bloke to death in a bathroom. Not out of his own will, mind, and he spends his story evading the police and uncovering the mystery of what happened to him.
What have I done?
Our other playable characters are police detectives Carla Valenti and Tyler Miles. Carla is actually given so much more importance and drive between the two of them, I honestly think Tyler's most important character trait is that he's apparently from the 80s. And he has a funk soundtrack following him wherever he goes. They spend 50% of their time discovering things we already found out while playing as Lucas, 25% discovering new things, and another 25% dealing with their own personal issues which don't affect much of the driving plot or are just plain inconsequential. To guide our characters through this plot we have 2 main gameplay branches, the walkie-talkie bits and the action scenes. The walkie-talkie bits in the PC version at least have awkward as fuck controls, but they can be rebound. They still have tank maneuvering no matter what you do though, and this isn't present in the console versions. The mouse-based interactions with objects, particularly climbing fences, are rather awkward and very precise as well. This again is less an issue on the console versions where analog sticks work a lot better for this purpose. The camera, which is also dragged by the mouse, has incredible amounts of mouse smoothing, so trying to spot something precisely leads to you recentering your view repeatedly. The control on the console versions, as I've stated, is a fair bit more organic, and it's these versions that I recommend. These scenes are mostly moved along when you rub your character against the object the game wants you to. Most of these segments are also timed, and sometimes you have to figure out which object the game wants you to rub against through clues left in the scene. These are done better than in Heavy Rain at least, and these scenes are typically a bit more cerebral. It's in these scenes that you can make decisions that they claim affect the plot. The best scenes are where your countdown timer is shown by your characters growing more and more bored with the game until they just decide to quit Fahrenheit.
That's the end of my story. I thought I could help to make the world a better place, but...
This leads me to the health bar of the game, a sanity meter which tops at neutral. Rubbing against certain objects in any given scene can increase or decrease the meter, so just walking around touching everything can keep you in tip-top mental state. It's quite amusing how arbitrary and sometimes backwards these things can be. Just murdered a man? Better turn on the jukebox, murder can upset a man by about 60 points. Take another scene. Check self out in the mirror for 5, convince girlfriend Tyler is happier being a cop for 20,
too much violence all my life to go live some kind of normal life like that.
and decide to piss her off for -30. In that scene I had an emotional net loss of 5 points. Could have done better. Bar goes empty and your character quits the case or offs themselves. Some scenes, for better or worse, add new gameplay gimmicks and minigames. Most aren't noteworthy, but there are some standout examples. Some scenes require you to balance a bar while slowly walking, which is like playing a Tony Hawk game, albeit an incredibly boring one. And there are 2 mercifully short but very frustrating stealth sections, one of which actually directs you to go against all instinct and walk into a guard's line of sight to advance the scene. That said, these sections do at least add a bit of variety to the game, and they can break up some tedious segments. The dialogue system is quite rigid. For one thing, in investigation scenes you can only ask so many questions, and the number of questions you get changes from scene to scene, so I can't just get every bit of info should I wish to. Which I kind of understand from Lucas, but you'd think Carla and Tyler would like that information stuff, but apparently they like a bit of a challenge. I also went in wanting to play Lucas as a bit of a bastard. Carla is a no-nonsense cop and Tyler is the more easygoing and jokey of the lot, but I gave up on that quickly as the descriptions for dialogue options are vague and characterless. In one scene I chose help intending Lucas feigned he could be of use to the cops, but instead he questioned how he could be.
I don't really see how I could be of any help to you.
The action scenes are the real draw of the game, however, and I do enjoy them for the most part, regardless of how disconnected you actually feel from your character during them. The basic gist is that 2 Simon Says panels appear. You press buttons in time with them and your character survives, or you don't press them and they don't. You have lives in these parts as well, and losing all of them just sends you back to the beginning of any given sequence. Seeing as the longest action segment is about 5 minutes in length, you'll never lose too much progress. These scenes are fun, from what I can see anyway. The Simon Says button overlay takes most of your attention away from the actual action on screen, and more to the vague directional prompts that kinda correlate to what's happening. It's a little self-defeating, actually. And while most of the big action scenes are fun set pieces, they're awkwardly animated and directed. My favourite part of the game is Lucas's hallucination where his apartment is trying to kill him. Every single object comes at him, one at a time, slowly, while Lucas stares them down in really stiff poses. Anyone watching him would have just seen a man jumping at and taunting his furniture. The beauty of this is that recording the game and watching it back actually lets you properly watch those big action scenes that you can't watch because you're kind of playing them. Also of note is that every failure is uniquely animated, and some of these are worth going after just for the novelty. These segments are incredibly easy, however, and most failures will be intentional. Not to mention every scene has a unique game over with narration, so if anything this game is a great game over showcase. Overall, the action segments, while a touch ironic that the most animated parts of the game can't actually be watched while playing them, and being very simplistic, are oddly satisfying to play. And then there are the graphics. While there's nothing noteworthy in the scenery or models themselves, and the stages are fine if a little bland, the faces and their animations are a touch odd. Important characters always default to a sort of vacant stare when not talking or emoting, like they just realised they're in a David Cage production. When they are emoting, it's a little extreme. Unimportant characters have flat-looking faces and a vacant expression. I don't remember back to the incredibly surreal tutorial where David Cage inserts himself within the game and asks you to describe a crash test dummy with the main character's face but with the eyes cut out as sexy. And that blank-faced dummy emoted more than any of the established characters, because you could actually feel this dummy longing for a swift and painless death. So, back to the plot. Right after the initial murder scene and subsequent investigation, the plot slows down dramatically for a time. In fact, much of the game has a rather slow pace. So to summarise the important stuff, Lucas starts covering his tracks from the cops, aided by premonitions he starts having. He then goes to tell his brother about the murder.
I've killed a man, Marcus.
Who then decides to point him to Agatha, who has experience with paranormal phenomena.
Want to talk to Agatha.
Meanwhile, during the police investigation, Carla gets over her fear of corpses, which will come in handy later, and finds a track of similar past murders, and Tyler wins a basketball game. Lucas comes to learn his actions were manipulated by an ancient mind called the Oracle, who needs dying people to see through the eyes of a symbolic two-headed snake to find the Indigo Child, which will lead to world domination through matters I've already forgotten and don't really care to recall. Agatha is killed and Lucas is found out by the cops.
Agatha.
His Matrix-inspired superpowers kick in and he goes on the run. He goes to his ex-girlfriend to hide for a scene, but she's kidnapped and killed shortly after, and Lucas dies trying to save her, but doesn't actually die. Look, it has no effect on the plot that he's technically dead, other than making some shit later on in the plot just kinda weird.
I don't know his name. I don't even know if there's anyone alive who does. All that I do know is that he's a Mayan oracle.
Lucas contacts Carla and explains his situation, and considering the weird shit she's been through, she teams up with him pronto. How will Tyler react? Well,
Nah, of course not. Plus, with everything that's going on now, I guess it doesn't really matter.
first, he won't really mind, and second, he'll move to Florida. Well, that one is optional, but bugger it, he has no effect on the plot after this moment anyway. I'm going to pause with the plot here, and that is a very abridged version of nominally important events that have happened over the last 4 hours of game time. The last hour of the game deserves a paragraph or two all to itself. Let's talk about some things to do with choices and certain elements of the story that I find noteworthy. The game does have some very nice moments when Lucas interacts with the police and when you clean up crime scenes as Carla and Tyler, because in these scenes you're essentially controlling the dramatic irony. In your first run through, it's quite interesting deciding how to play these scenes out, because from a gameplay perspective you need all three characters to succeed. So do you mess up when playing as the police so that Lucas can go on easier? Well, you see, that's where it comes crashing down, because the plot has to play out in a certain way, so you have to succeed to an extent as both sides to play on. So some choices become superfluous, reducing the choice aspect a little more than the novelty, and only very few choices affect how things actually do play out, with 2 or 3 final options deciding the ending you get. The quality and fun of each scene can fluctuate wildly as well. You go from rather exciting sections evading police and dodging furniture, to the mentioned flashback stealth sections that are completely painful to play. The level of fun and intrigue is inconsistent. It's also problematic that the gameplay gets in the way of any chance of immersion. I'm constantly dragged back out by the Simon Says overlay or fiddly mouse controls, or just fiddly controls in general. So, back to the plot. Again. The final hour of the game is what everyone remembers. The slow pace of the rest of the game is kicked to the curb as shit just kind of rockets to a conclusion. Lucas, who can now see through the eyes of the Oracle, discovers the Indigo Child at the same time as him, so they head off to the orphanage to collect her. And since they arrive at roughly the same time and Lucas discovers the power of flight, they decide to settle it with a cheesy mid-air action scene. Lucas's powers do pretty much come out of goddamn nowhere. Then, not 5 minutes later, we're talking to Agatha. Except it's not Agatha because she died earlier in the plot.
Lucas, I'm going to have to eliminate you.
And this is an AI from the unintroduced Purple Clan, who have 2 scenes and 1 whole ending dedicated to them. Also, the Oracle has a previously unintroduced legion of mysterious, highly trained soldiers, which might have come in handy earlier considering the Oracle has been trying to kill Lucas since the very beginning. So Lucas, running away from the homicidal AI, finds out that all the homeless people you've been seeing throughout the game actually belong to a secret third clan called the Invisibles, who know to send the Indigo Child to a military base where Lucas grew up. In less than 5 minutes, 2 new entities have been introduced, one with at least some build-up, one with absolutely none. The ancient Mayan Oracle suddenly has a private army, and in case we weren't rushing things enough, Carla falls in love with Lucas, having known him personally for less than a day. Then he, having got over his freshly dead ex-girlfriend he still had feelings for, knocks her up with his zombie baby and they head off to a military base in a hobo-converted tread-based snow truck. Lucas learns how to shoot laser beams and uses them to dispatch the antagonists in about 2 minutes, and you win the happy ending. Now, I'm going to say it before I get to the overall summary, but just for the last hour of the game, you should definitely play it for yourself. It comes out of nowhere, and it's spectacular to watch, not because it's good, but because it's there, and it's fucking funny. The rushed ending and the slow pace of the early game supposedly comes from David Cage overestimating how far his budget would take him, and what we got was only the first act and a rushed ending to tie it up, with the planned game going on maybe twice as long, with more acts wrapping up character arcs and explaining the motivations of the Oracle, along with the suddenly introduced Purple Clan. But due to his oversight, he had to quickly cap the game off. Personally, I'm glad it isn't twice as long. Its 5-hour length can already drag at times, and while I do enjoy the game, it's only enjoyed in short bursts. It's presumably where most of Tyler's character arc went as well. Lucas Kane, on the other hand, well, he was cursed to do several cameos in Heavy Rain. So to cap it off, yeah, it's okay, bye.